Well, for more on vocational training, our own Philip Yin sat down with Mary Alice McCarthy. She's the Senior Policy Analyst for New America's Education Policy Program. He began by asking what's causing this recent resurgence.
That's such a great question, and you're so right when you say that that vocational education has been evolving, and a lot of what we used to consider vocational education today, we do consider mainstream. We sort of stop calling it vocational when it moves into the mainstream world. But the reason we're seeing these programs come into our mainstream academic programs is because there's such a reward to skills today. As the economy changes and as our labor market changes and as skills become sort of the differentiator between who's going to make it in today's economy and who's not, the ability of educational programs to deliver concrete skills is more and more in demand. This is really true at the high school level, but where we really see it is in post-secondary and college and universities, where people of all ages are coming back for programs that are maybe 1 year or 2 years, not necessarily 4-year programs, to acquire very specific skills.
Such as plumbing, electrical work, metalworking, woodworking. I mean, sure, I know these aren't sexy necessarily, right, but this is sort of every economy in the world. You have to have these type of workers who basically, for lack of a better word, really build the economy.
Well, and that's what we're seeing in the data, is that people who can repair things, either machines or people, are folks who are in high demand in our economy. And whether they're plumbers or machinists or carpenters or auto workers too, their skills are becoming more and more sophisticated as all of these trades become more and more sort of technologized, for lack of a better words. So vocational education too, though, extends into other areas. It's not just the skilled trades anymore. Countries like Austria have big vocational training programs, apprenticeship programs in finance. Healthcare is becoming a big area for vocational programs. So, too, as discrete and concrete, particularly STEM skills, become more in demand in every sector, we're seeing a greater demand for what we would call vocational programs, even though these days we may not even call them that.
Yeah, it's a broad term. We have to be very careful not to overgeneralize. I remember that there was a lot of talk that we would have a shortage of nurses, we would have a shortage of machinists, we would have a shortage of woodworkers, and fast forward to where we are today. Is that still the case, and have we made any progress in closing that gap?
So I would say that we are still facing shortages on specific workers with specific skills, particularly those IT skills. So across the economy, whether you're in healthcare or finance or in retail or in machining, employers are looking for workers with strong IT skills. Programmers and coders can get a job just about anywhere. In the healthcare industry then, too, we're seeing, as healthcare is changing, we're seeing shortages in those technician jobs. In manufacturing, this tends to be more geographically specific, but in areas of the country or of the world that are employing a lot of advanced manufacturing techniques, they're having a hard time finding the folks that they need. So, yes, we're seeing shortages, but I do think that we're also seeing a very strong response, both from students and institutions, in filling those gaps, and employers themselves.
Let me take it one step further in terms of filling the gaps. Can local governments do something, or is it a state level, is it a county level, or is it a national level? Where does it all begin? So
I would say, actually, local solutions are generally the best. And what you really need in order to fill these gaps, if we're really going to, any country that's really going to respond to the needs to be constantly upgrading skills is going to need really strong partnerships between their employer sector, their business sector, and then local educational institutions, whether they're public or private. That's where the countries that do this well have those strong partnerships. Their employers are well organized, and their schools are well organized, and they're able to talk to each other at the local level so they can respond in time to changing skill demands. And I think when you try to have national solutions, that can be very difficult.
Last thing, education is obviously very competitive. I can go, for example, go on YouTube and learn how to do some electrical work at home. Not advisable, by the way, but there are a lot of ways to learn these skills. You can do it yourself, you can go to a vocational school, and as you said, there are a lot of traditional places that you can learn it as well at sort of regular universities anywhere in the world, for that matter. How do vocational schools, how can they stand out, or I should say compete with all the other alternatives that are available if I'm interested in a particular skill set? Yeah, that's such a great question, because we're seeing lots of new providers popping up all over the place, and it's really an exciting space right now, sort of, if you call it vocational training or skills-based training, because we've got
boot camps, coding boot camps popping up, organizations like General Assembly that are completely outside of our formal higher education system, but that are training people in in-demand skills. I would say that if you're a vocational school or you're a training provider, you might not even want to use the term vocational, or you're just a skills provider, what's going to make you stand out is whether or not your graduates get jobs, and how well you track those outcomes, and your ability to sort of communicate that. The partnerships that you have with employers and how strong those are. And then also, in some cases, it can be whether or not you're helping people get to kinds of credentials that have real labor market value. We see a lot of these alternative providers popping up in the programming world because people can go learn programming skills and get certified in certain programming languages without going through a formal education program. So those spaces where people don't need to have a degree in order to move in the labor market, those are the spaces where these new providers are really having a lot of success.